Are you ready to go offside? Because it's time for Offside Hockey Talk with your host, James Roberts, and myself, Doug Ireland.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the After the Draft special here on Offside Hockey Talk. Tonight we have great guests sitting down with us to break down the Leafs draft. Tonight we have Taco, a.k.a. Marners to Tavares, on Twitter. Everyone seems to lean on him for his prospect knowledge, and we will do so tonight. Also on the show tonight, we have Mark Seidel. He's going to be talking about the Leafs prospects, the draft, and the Leafs going forward. Beyond that, we also have Kyle Outridge to talk about the prospects he knows about the Leafs drafted, also the draft as a whole. And of course, we will be sitting down with Omar White. We sit down with him each and every summer and break down what the Leafs need to do going forward and what the team will look like coming opening night. All right, guys, this is a great episode. Get ready, because here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here post-draft with the one and the only Taco. Everybody knows him, Marner to Tavares on Twitter. He is here to talk about the Leafs prospects. Everybody checks in with this guy asking questions, so I figured why not go right to the source over the guys the Leafs drafted on the weekend. Taco, how you doing tonight?
Great, how are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Not a worries, I'm doing just fine. So, what did you think about the draft over the weekend?
I think the Leafs had a pretty good draft overall. There was definitely a trend within the selections. Definitely some high skill, high compete, a lot of playmakers, a lot of puck-moving defensemen. I think the overall was pretty good, considering we didn't have a first-round pick.
Well, a lot of people seem to think the pick that we had, 53rd overall, he was slated to be a first-round pick, fell to the second round. Do you have the same opinion as that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I didn't have him on my radar since we didn't have a first. I was pretty damn surprised that he was there at 53, to be honest with you. Yeah, he's a really good playmaker, fluid, accurate passes. He led the Petes in scoring, despite missing 14 games during the year. And he definitely makes his teammates around him and line mates better. Just for example, like Adam Timlek last year had 29 points, and this year he had 53. His centerman, Chris Paquette, he had 29 last year. He went to 52. So there's definitely he drives the play very, very well. He's a dual threat player, good playmaker, dangerous shooter. He's got a great release. He can be just as dangerous while in motion as he can be stationary. Again, high compete level, and he back checks and forechecks like a motherfucker. So, I mean, you know, considering his size, he's 5'9", 161, but you know, he's a late birthday, born September the 11th. His brother Michael is 6 foot 180. His brother Jason 6'2", 200. I think there's room to grow there. I think with it being a late birthday, he's got a full year behind everybody. I think there's some definite positive there to grow into his frame and become stronger.
Well, that's a good thing, because that was one of the critiques this weekend, was the Leafs drafted so small yet again. So you know that a lot of people were wondering, where's the size, where's the bite, especially if you look at the two past Cup winners now, with St. Louis having size and snarl, and of course the Washington Capitals, you know, with Tom Wilson being the highlight player there for the hitting and the grinding and the wearing you down. So this player here, if you had to mark a comparable on the Toronto Maple Leafs to this player, who would it be?
I think size-wise and playmaker first. You can easily go to, say, Marner. I think a more accurate NHL comparable would be Jonathan Merchessault. Playmaker, you know, good shot, small size. I think they're both pretty well one-to-one ratio, really.
Now, before we dive into the rest of the picks the Leafs made over the weekend and talk a little bit more about the Maple Leafs as a whole, I have to ask you about this notion that's being floated around. Don Cherry also hit on this one. Same with a few other people that I speak with. They seem to think that we should be drafting local kids. We should be drafting players from the GTHL. We should be keeping it all Ontario-centric. Now, obviously, my opinion's been stated online. I think that you should go after the best player available or your best scouted player. It's the reason why you take all year to do so. But do you think there's anything to this, or is it just, you know, people wanting something because they're not getting it right now, and it seems to be the way other teams are putting together wins.
Yeah, I think Don's just got an old mind for the game. I think he loves his Ontario players. He's a big homer, obviously. I think there's just so many great leagues out there nowadays compared to what there was before. Junior A levels, college levels, high schoolers. There's players from all over, and I think if the best player available is who you're going to go with, I don't think it really matters where they're from. I think even if you're going to the high school ranks now where there's players coming from there compared to what there was before, there's a lot of players coming from the junior A levels, like Cale Makar came from Alberta. Colton Parayko came from Alberta as a junior A level back in 2012. I think he was drafted out of Fort McMurray. There's leagues everywhere nowadays, so you can go everywhere and find great players. So I think it's important to pick the best player available regardless.
No, I agree with that notion 100%, and a few other people obviously chimed in and said the same thing that we're talking about right now. The other thing is, a lot of people just see the fact that he was born in the States and that he's a stateside player, but Robertson actually moved here and played through the Greater Toronto area. He went through the GTHL. He plays for the Peterborough Petes. So he grew up in the systems that these guys are preaching and wanting players to come from. So in a sense, he still is from our neck of the woods, so to speak, because that's where he grew up playing through. But you don't hear any of that. You don't see any of that because someone who quickly looks at who he drafted says, oh, he was drafted from the States. Another American.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can look at Jack Hughes as well. He grew up American, went to the Toronto system to play with the best hockey available to him, and there's no doubt that Ontario's got one of the best hockey programs out there. I think if the best player does come from Ontario, you take him regardless. I think Robertson mentioned the other day when he got drafted, he compared himself to Trevor Moore. He's a smaller player, he plays with some skill and grit and compete level, and he's from California as well. So.
Yep, and you know what? We all love Trevor Moore. We all scream all year long, we want more.
Oh, yeah.
So, you get what you get. And obviously, people say they want players that want to put themselves through the boards to be Maple Leafs. And I believe that every person in the NHL is there because they want to be there and play. So the notion that someone says a guy, comes from the States or comes from over in Europe and comes over here and doesn't want to compete and play, I'm pretty sure they want to play to the best of their abilities to make sure they maximize their earning potential, for the age that they have. Because obviously we all know hockey players' careers, it's a short window. Some guys are lucky to stretch it out, but as we've seen now with sports science, a lot of guys are tailing off, in their mid to even sometimes early 30s now, and they're not getting a sniff at a roster spot because the young guys coming in. So that notion to me seems to be wearing a little thin.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's definitely not a lot of players playing 35 and plus now. It's a young man's game. You're looking for the fastest, most skilled player that can develop the quickest and cycle the guys in and out. And with a salary cap game now too, there's a lot of players that come in the cheaper entry-level contracts as well, and that plays in a factor.
Well, it plays a factor, and also more than ever, you're seeing players coming on an entry-level deal and being able to contribute with their teams. I remember, back in the day when it was all veteran-centric and the young guys would have a hard time getting in, even the guys that would get in wouldn't be very productive or wouldn't be put in a place to be productive. But now, like you said, it is a young man's league, and that spotlight is shining brightly on those boys.
Yeah, for sure. You basically have to maximize your entry-level deals and compete, be as competitive as you can while they're cheap.
Well, that's what the Leafs tried to do with their window, but, we know what's happening there right now. We'll get to that just a little bit later. But with pick number 85, Taco, we picked up, I want to say, Mikko, is it Kokkonen?
Mikko Kokkonen, yeah.
Kokkonen. So another defenseman. The Leafs obviously like to pick up these puck-moving defensemen. What do you know about this gentleman here? Obviously 18 years old. Another small kind of player. I think he was the biggest one of the draft. 5'11", 198 pounds. Left-handed shot, even though we're looking for a right shot D. What do you know about this guy here?
He's a pretty physically mature 18-year-old. He's been pretty much this size since he was about 15 years old. It definitely helped him translate into the top Finnish league. He's a defense with a good shot from the point. He likes to find the shooting lanes, and he's really good at keeping the shots low and through traffic, making it very tippable, and definitely gets some the rebounds for some offense going. He's got good vision, really good passing ability, distributes the puck up very intelligently, and he's got a really good transition game. To me, his biggest weakness is his skating, though. He's got a very lack of foot speed. His pace of the game is pretty poor. I think what that translates to is I think he finds it a little bit hard to be as good defensively as he possibly can. He gets beat to the side pretty regularly. I think if he improves his foot speed a little bit, I think his game is going to take new levels because he's got really good offensive ability. I think putting up 19 points in 56 games is definitely reflective of that. So I think there's definitely potential there. I think overall that's a really good upside project pick there for a third rounder.
Well, the good thing for the Maple Leafs is we do have Barb Underhill on our staff. I'd still believe, great power skating coach. Obviously helps guys with edges, helps guys with building leg strength and getting that explosiveness. Player that I look towards and say, look at the improvement there is Frederick Gauthier. I don't know about you guys, but last year watching Frederick Gauthier pick up speed and actually bust through the neutral zone or just start skating fast, it was mind-boggling because you never seen that out of him before. So maybe a little bit of tutelage there coming over to North America and just getting, I guess, accustomed to this size of the ice, but also getting, some training from guys and gals that can take him to that next level. And sometimes, a fresh scenario and a fresh set of eyes on a guy might help.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of, basically what this guy needs is, personally Barb Underhill to come in and try and fix his mechanics a little bit, try and fix his skating, improve on his strides. With that, his gap control is going to be much better, and he's going to be able to shut down defensemen and box them out way easier. I like that he's got a very active stick already, so he's capable of defending. I think just improving the skating on him is going to make him worlds better. And the same goes for Robertson with his skating as well. Barb Underhill should be able to fix that.
We'll definitely tighten up. So as the theme has been going for this defenseman here, Kakkonen, what would an NHL comparable be? We won't just say the Leafs. We'll say an NHL comparable. People love to throw that around because they want to know potentially what this guy could be, even if it's a poor man's version. Who do you peg this guy kind of being like?
If I had to make a comparable to him, I'd say maybe like a bottom six, definitely a possible top four, two-way defenseman, maybe like a Michael Kempney. I think he comes to mind. Not the best skater, but definitely has a good two-way game to him. So a little bit of offensive upside. I think at the lower end, for sure, him.
All right, well, that's something we'll look out for, and hopefully can get the mechanics and skating down and fixed up at Barb Underhill. We moved to pick 115 with Mikhail Abramov, a Quebec Major Junior Hockey League player for the Victoriaville Tigre. Again, 18-year-old, center right wing, shoots left, from Russia. Stat line, 54 points last year, 16 goals, 38 assists in 62 games. What do you see in this player, and what would the Maple Leafs be picking this player for?
I see an excellent playmaker with great hockey vision. He's got good skating, good compete level, and high IQ on both ends of the ice. Like Robertson, he back checks and forechecks and supports his defenders quite well. He possesses a good shot, good release, good accuracy. He definitely needs to shoot a little bit more. He's a pass-first type of player. He's got a good shot, so why not use it, right?
That's right.
I think he was a great pickup for a mid-rounder. I think he can grow into a useful player. He's really good on the penalty kill. He's got good speed. I think if he gets a little bit stronger because he is a little bit weak, he's got small size, I think he can turn into a pretty useful player.
Well, now the theme keeps going here. Who do you think he's going to be comparable to in the NHL?
I think if you had to compare him to anybody, I think if you have Dmytro Timashov right now really came to mind when we picked this player.
I will say something really funny right quick. I actually just typed in right now Dmitry Timashov to look him up at the exact same time. So same wavelength.
There you go. Yeah, I think there's going to be a few years left in the queue and move up to the AHL. But I think if you compare the both of them, their skill sets are pretty identical.
Well, that's a player that I hope does get a look at Leafs camp is Timashov. And if he does and somehow does make it to the roster at some point, maybe we'll have a solid comparison and maybe another player of the same ilk coming up. Maybe when Timashov is going to be too expensive to keep. Who knows? But it's good to know that we have these players in the pipeline and good to see that we're picking up right guys because so far you haven't had a complaint about anyone, so that's pretty good.
No, it's been pretty quality pick so far. There's definitely high value in all of them.
So our next pick was pick 124. I'm just going to say Nicholas Abreu because I couldn't say his last name if I tried. He's a forward, looks like an overager at 20 years old, shoots left. 80 points last year, 29 goals, 51 assists. Obviously, players that are a little bit older than their peers do tend to put up a little bit more points as an overager. What do you see in this guy here?
Well, he played for the Chicago Steel of the USHL last year. He led the team in scoring. I have a feeling that they had a lot of eyes on him over the last couple of years. Matthew Barnaby actually played on that team, and he was invited to our development camp last year. Gunnar Wolf Fontaine was invited to our camp this year. Great name, by the way.
Yes.
And Connor Carrick's little brother, Hunter Carrick, actually played on that team as well. So I feel like there was a lot of eyes over the last couple of years. He's a pretty patient playmaker. What I see from him is he likes to draw the defenders in before striking on a pass that usually has pretty high percentage success rate. He's good skating. He's got pretty good footwork, and he's got a pretty high compete level, which basically goes hand in hand with the rest of our players that we've picked. He lacks the size. He's pretty weak, and really limits what he can do in the board battles and along the walls. He's committed to Harvard for next year, so I think going there, he might be able to add some strength and physically mature himself.
Now, is this a player that you see as strictly a project player that they'll let him do his bit in university and then see where he goes from there?
Yeah, it's definitely a long-term project player. I think not a lot of upside because he's pretty weak, but there's still a definite possibility there. I see a lot of Adam Brooks in him, to be quite honest with you.
Okay. Well, you still got a comparable out of the NHL, so that makes us all happy. So we'll keep rolling a little bit. Pick number 146, Michael Koster, a defender, again, shooting left, 18 years old, keeping with the theme of 5'9". Last year, he had a pretty good stat line, 40 games played with the high school there, 71 points, 21 goals, 50 assists. And then the Tri-City Storm of the USHL, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points in 15 games. Seems like he's an offensive-minded defenseman. Just strictly looking at the stats, what do you know about this guy, Taco?
To be honest with you, he wasn't actually on my radar. I had heard the name going around. I've seen him around a few times. He was teammates with Rhett Pitlick. Unfortunately, went to Montreal there. I think he's a pretty good player. So I've seen his names going around, but just looking through the highlight package and reading a few things on him over the last few days. He's a compact defender. He can shoot the puck well. He's pretty hell of a playmaker, to be honest with you. He's got great vision and does a great job of breaking out of his own zone. Then again, high compete level and some jam to his game despite his size. He definitely does not back down. He will board battle, and he will compete. For a fifth rounder, I think it's a great project pick again. For what his skill set brings, he's definitely a good playmaker. And, long-term project. We'll see what happens there. We'll see where he plays next year in the USHL. And then he's committed to the University of Minnesota after that. And under Bob Motzko, the coach that was with St. Cloud there for the last 13 seasons, I think he's going to get great development there.
Well, let's hope he can develop into something useful for the Maple Leafs down the line. obviously with our roster being full, and then obviously the AHL also brimming with some talent, these guys have a little bit more time to develop. It's not as a rush as it used to be to try to get guys, developed and in, even though we did let some guys over ripen. But now we can take time with picks and actually do these project picks. For this guy here, for Koster, is there a comparable you haven't that comes to mind for either an NHL player or a player that people might know?
I think if you look at a guy like Mac Hollowell, he's, again, small player, puck mover, he's got some jam. If you look at the both of them and the way they play, I think there's some definite similarities there.
All right, so our pick with number 204, you can hammer me down on the name if I get it wrong, Kalle Lopinen.
Yep, you bang on there.
All right, well, there we go. 5'11", so he would be one of the taller picks that we've had. 18 years old, a right-handed shooting defenseman. Everybody start clapping right now. He has 18 games played last year, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. What do you know about this player here, and what can he bring, obviously, way further down the line?
He's got good shooting skill, gets the puck through the net quite well. He's got a great one-timer option and a quick release, so he's really a quality good player on the power play. He can move the puck quite well. He transitions up the ice very nicely. And despite his lack of strength, he does engage physically and will battle quite well on the boards. He does possess a very good compete level. Defensively, he does need some work, and he could be at times caught out of position. You can see him running around the ice a little bit, so there's definitely work to be done there. Skating's average, and I'd like to see some improvement in his strides and maybe find a next gear with his speed. But overall, it's great value for a 7th rounder. In recent memory, our European scouts have done really well with capitalizing on their late picks. So this is a really good project for him.
Well, hopefully this guy can turn out to be something we can use down the line. Again, the theme of this draft seems to be project players, things we can use later on, players that we can take time developing. So that seems to be the overall gist of things. Is there anything that you've seen through this draft for the Leafs that concerns you, or anything that you take away thinking, okay, this is what we need to do going forward?
I think basically the theme for me is high skill, high compete, and basically everybody is able to move the puck and can play make. I think, if you compare it to previous drafts where we're picking a few players that, although they may be bigger, they have no real offensive skill where they can move the puck out or, possess any of the traits that the players today have.
Oh, you mean all the truculence?
Yeah. So I think it's important that basically, we're picking guys that have a lot more upside, even though they are project picks and they aren't the biggest guys. Their skill definitely translates to today's NHL a lot better than what previous picks were. So I think overall, we did a really good job of picking some quality players.
Well, hopefully they turn into things that we can see and, get excited for down the line. A couple other things I want to ask you about. Over the weekend, we did see the Marleau trade break and Marleau go to Carolina. Obviously, we had to pay, I wouldn't say a steep price. We knew it was going to be something, and it was going to be something that had to be met in order to accommodate a trade to get Marleau out and take his number off our books completely. What do you feel about this trade right off the bat?
Right off the bat, I was pretty upset about it, to be honest. I think it was a pretty ridiculous price to give up a first-round pick. I think as the time went on, I got to think about it a little bit more. The price to get rid of them, to free up cap space, means that we get to keep our players. So, in turn, we don't get that first-round selection next year, but I think, keeping a Kapanen and a Johnson in for that price is pretty worth a first-round pick. So I think it was pretty necessary.
What I like about the trade is everyone seems to have learned from Pierre Dorion about making sure that your pick is top 10 protected from now on. Ever since that happened with Ottawa, you never would have expected that with the team that they put together with Karlsson and Duchesne and the likes. So now that stipulation is there. So that makes me feel a little bit better, just in case for whatever reason we bottom right out next year. But like you just mentioned, this trade does free us up to sign Cappy and Yanni for basically a little bit more than the Marleau average per year, which is pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Now, the other hot button issue right now in Leafland is obviously Mitch Marner. I think Mitch Marner will be a Toronto Maple Leaf. I don't think there'll be any ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think it's all posturing. As I keep posting, I think his agent is nothing but a Paul Heyman wannabe, just getting his face out there. And he has the stage right now with a player of Marner's profile to be able to push his agenda and put himself out there. We've seen him do it with Anderson over in Columbus, and every time he does these stunts, they don't seem to work out. So I'm hoping, A, that this doesn't work out the way that he plans it's going to, and B, Marner gets signed and everybody can kind of get off his back a little bit, because I don't particularly think it's the player's agenda to smear his own name and to make himself look bad. Obviously, he likes being a Maple Leaf. He's very active in the community, very active with the fans, and is a bubbly, energetic kid. When it comes down to the brass tacks of business, it's your agent and, unfortunately, your father in this case that dictates what's going on, really, because you haven't heard any of these negative things come out of Mitch Marner's mouth. It's always his mouthpiece, Paul Heyman or Mr. Ferris, whatever you want to call him. So at this point, what do you feel, Taco, about the Mitch Marner situation?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head there. It's gotten out of control. I think, we've been through this last year with the Nylander situation. I think this year is even worse because Marner's a more prolific name, basically. So, add into that, there's more drama with the agent, and his dad is definitely no secret to the public that he's a bit of a menace when it comes to this. So I think in the end, Mitch has to do what Mitch wants to do. So if he wants to stay with the team and be as competitive as possible, you look around the league and you see some guys that have taken some reasonable deals, all but fair, and sign what you think is fair and try and build a winner.
The thing that kind of got me all weird about this whole situation is it seems like every other RFA that's big name, whether it's Braden Point, whether it's Patrick Laine, the list goes on, they don't get mentioned as much as Marner, but also they seem to be waiting until Mitch Marner signs to see what the market precedent's going to be. And I'm really, really hoping the Leafs can get him for 9.5.
Yeah, I think he's definitely the domino. I felt that way for a while. I think with the whole him being in Toronto and the whole media circus there is definitely waiting on Marner to see what he does, and then the rest will fall pretty quickly after that. I think it's kind of crazy that Marner's the only one that gets mentioned in all these things. There's a lot of quality players on that list for RFAs that could potentially be offer sheeted or ask for close to the same amount of money that Mitch is asking for. So I think there's definitely some quality names there.
Yeah, see, and this is the problem with being, I guess, Toronto and having all of the, I guess, hockey media-centric things here in our city. You have Sportsnet that is in Toronto. They broadcast out of there. You also have TSN, and you have all the insiders and everything that is right there, fingertips away from being at anything to do with the Maple Leafs. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that if Braden Point played in this market, it would be the same thing. But because it is the Maple Leafs and they are perceived as a mecca of hockey, that's the reason why the spotlight's so bright.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what player it is, really. There's media circuits around everybody. I'll be pretty happy once the last big RFA deal is done, and then we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait until 5 years now until Matthews is done, and then we have to go through it all again. So
you know what? And it may, for me, last year we signed not Patrick Marleau. We signed John Tavares, and it felt like no one could enjoy it because you had the William Nylander situation, you had the Matthews situation, and then also you have now the Mitch Marner situation. So we didn't really get to enjoy, what we got as a new toy. So hopefully, once all these deals are done, we can actually, as fans, enjoy the season and not worry about anything else and just let the team play and enjoy what we have.
Yeah, it's felt like since maybe 2016, since we sucked, that we've all been united as one to enjoy the actual team. So it would be nice to actually go forward and watch the games with enjoyment.
That's the truth. Well, no matter what happens, there will always be epic meltdowns on social media. doesn't matter what happens with the Maple Leafs. There's always something to gripe, cry, and bitch about.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
unfortunately.
That's the truth. Well, Taco, it has been awesome to have you on. We have talked for, God, it's got to be about 2 years now, just about every topic underneath the sun, via Twitter, either DM or regular talk. So it's good to finally put a little voice to this and get it out there for people to listen to. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was pretty good. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a worries. We will have you back again, my friend. Enjoy the summer.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
All right, so that was Taco Marner to Tavares. You know him on Twitter. He is the go-to guy for all the Leafs prospects. A little under the radar. He doesn't have the blue check mark. He doesn't have the notoriety as Mark Seidel or some other guys, but definitely check him out. He has all the info you need on the Leafs guys. We have more coming up very shortly. We are going to have on Mark Seidel. We also will have Kyle Outridge, and we will have Omar White of the Pension Plan Puppets. Stay tuned for the rest of your guests. And we are back now with the one, the only, the amazing Omar White. This is an ill-fated conversation. It has been so long in the making. This might as well be hyped up with pyro and everything that is finally happening. Omar, welcome back to Offside. How are you doing, my friend?
yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, it is funny. I've been trying to get this worked out for a while now, but just something always gets in the way. So it's kind of funny we finally settled on a Monday of all days to get this going. But I'm definitely excited to be back on.
Well, we're going to jump right into the questions that we have for you here, my friend. So we're going to get right into the jam of it. So this past weekend, obviously, we all know the draft did happen. Let's break down one thing that came up, the Patrick Marleau deal. We needed the cap space. Now that he's gone and we have the cap space, what are your initial feelings and thoughts, not only on Marleau moving on, but on what we gave up to get rid of Mr. Patrick Marleau?
Yeah, that whole thing was really funny because basically, I'm just trying to track, other people's draft picks, see what's going on. And then when the news went out that Marleau got dealt, I was like, okay, cool. And then I see what the price is, and I see conditional first. So me thinking, me being the average person, I thought, okay, so is it if he plays 40 games, it's a second round pick, but if they make the playoffs and they make it to the third round, it's a first round pick. And then I look at the details and it's okay, so if next season, if they're in the lottery, it's draft protected, and then after if so, then they go on the next year. So I'm like, oh, so it's a first round pick regardless. So that's stung, right? Because it sucks when you have to give up a first round pick for a salary cap dump, which is essentially what it is, right? But at the same time, you have to think of if the Leafs are going to be where we expect them to be, then you'd hope that pick is in the low 20s. And I guess another thing too is that obviously the go-to when it comes to these type of deals is that you would attach maybe some type of prospect to it. So I'm thinking maybe, when Dubas is trying to talk to other teams, we saw him with the double phone image has been going all over Twitter. So you talk to all those bunch of teams, they're probably saying, yeah, okay, I'll take on Marleau, but you have to give me, I don't know, maybe you have to give me Bracco, or you have to give me Timothy Liljegren or whatever. And I'm sure the Leafs have high hopes on these players, or maybe even Kapanen Johnson. And Dubas, thankfully he said no. And I guess Carolina was like, okay, we'll take him. You're not going to give us a prospect. Well, we want a first-round pick. So it sucks, but at the same time, it's just another example of why you have to be careful in the salary cap era, and that you can't just, maybe, when you're going through those negotiations around July 1st, if you want to give someone incentive and hey, we'll give you 3 years at this really high cap instead of 2, eventually it'll come up to you, and you have to figure out a way to deal with that. And when you see the Leafs situation, when they have a whole bunch of key RFAs that they have to re-sign, if you have to give up a first-round pick to move Marleau, then I guess it's what's going to happen. Now, as for Marleau leaving, it sucks. And reading what he wrote was such a heart squeezer, because it's you're such a great person and you're a mentor to Matthews and Marner and you're so great for the city, but man, you just couldn't play on the team anymore. So So obviously, it's something that needed to happen. It's probably one of many deals that Dubas is going to have to make. We know that Zeitz have requested a trade. They might have to find some other way to get more cap room. Especially, I don't know if it's. I don't think it's official yet, but we know that Janssen and Kapanen have some type of deal on the books, but they're waiting for other things to come into play. But yeah, like having Marleau, man, like it was so sweet because you're used to seeing him play with the shark on his chest, but seeing him with the Leafs was just so weird at first. But he's such a great person, was such a great guy. Good depth for the team, but eventually you just know that eventually you have to let your core players kind of step up and take charge of everything. And I hope now that all the players who were touched by Marleau's teachings and him as a person can, I guess, take that and move on. But now it's business. Now it's time to get serious. So it's bittersweet giving up the first round pick, but it had to be done, and I'm glad it happened.
I mean, one thing I'll say is that if there's ever going to be a draft pick that comes back and bites the Toronto Maple Leafs in the butt, it's going to end up being this one. That's just
100%.
That's the kind of luck you get
100%.
as a Leafs fan and as the Leafs organization that's going to be the guy that ends up being 130 point getter and looks like the next Gretzky in 5 years. So
I'm going to ask you both a question on the Marleau.
That pick is going to be packaged. That pick's going to be packaged in another deal. And then that deal is going to end up getting someone who's going to be the next Wayne Gretzky. And then it's gonna happen. It always does. It always things just can't happen to the Leafs. It always has to be something extravagant. The Leafs just can't lose. They have to lose in a dramatic way. Hey, you're up 3-2 with the series win. You can win it at home. No, let's go back to Game 7, TD Garden, and lose because why not? So yeah, I can definitely see some dramatics coming from that pick for sure.
Well, I got one thing on Marleau, guys. I got to ask the question. Does he ever touch the ice in a Carolina Hurricanes uniform?
Absolutely not. I think they buy him out and he signs with San Jose.
Doug?
I mean, does it make sense for... I mean, I could see that happening if the purpose is to get Marleau to retire in a San Jose, play his last game in a San Jose uniform. I don't know that he's going to have another full on the other hand, I didn't think he was going to have too many more full seasons anyways. Who knows? He could be the next friggin' Gordie Howe that plays until he's 50 years old, the way he's going. So, I mean, there's a lot of teams around the league that can use a 15, 16 goal scorer, 30, 40 point getter. That's not worthless. If you ignore his age, that's fairly decent. That being said, I don't think Carolina can use him. I think I'm going to agree with Omar.
All right. Well, Doug, you are up on the next question on the Omar White episode.
Wow, I get my own title. It's awesome.
So the Leafs went out and they picked up some small forwards, but all the guys that they've picked up are high talent players. They're not big, but they're big talent. And I'm just wondering what your takeaway is from the draft and who they picked up.
Yeah, I mean, that's right out of the Dubas handbook there, right? And I know, and especially after this last Cup run, when you see St. Louis in Boston, the Stanley Cup final, all the media and the hockey minds are going back on you need to have brute force to make it all the way. And then you have Peter DeBoer after the Western Conference Finals saying the bigger team won or something or along those lines. So I know that mantra is coming back, but it's still a skill league. It's you pay for goals, you pay for that high-end skill, that high-end talent. There's a reason why everyone's freaking about all these RFAs coming up, because they're highly skilled players, right? And I feel where the Leafs position are right now is that they just need to find ways. Even if it might not be the biggest player, you need to get the best player at each pick. Because eventually you're going to have a situation where the Leafs are going to be up against the cap every single year. But you also hope that every single year they're giving themselves an opportunity to win. And how are you going to do that? You're going to have to do what Chicago did. You have some people, you let them go who are making more money. You bring in people that you drafted that you can have on entry-level contracts, right? So for me, at first you kind of look at it, you have, I think the tallest person they drafted was 5'11", right? So obviously the older mentality, you can kind of be oh well, they're going to get pushed around, blah blah blah. But skill wins nowadays, right? Like, and again, as big as St. Louis was, it was their skilled players that got it done as well in terms of the goal scoring and their effectiveness on the ice. And I think that's what you need to pay attention to. And considering the fact, like, they just got drafted, they have some time, they can put on an inch or two, right? So it doesn't really matter too much. So for me, I'm not too concerned about how tall they are, how big they are. I'm just worried about, how they develop, if they, how well they play, where they fit into the system down the line, and if they can end up being players for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think when it comes to the draft, that's all you're worrying about is, can this player be a key contributor for me down the line, right? And I think that's what you need to focus on. Like going on the completely other side. Like we look at the Montreal Canadiens, who drafted Cole Caulfield, 15th overall. He's 5'7", but people are saying he's the best goal scorer like in the draft. Like I think he had like 72 goals with the U.S. National Development Program. So, but again, you have people knocking his height, saying he's not big enough, right? So I think it's a conversation that's always going to happen. Whether you take the bigger player or the smaller skilled forward. But I think it's just like what I said before. You have to ask yourself: is this a player who fits the atmosphere, the culture, whatever you want to call it, of our organization, and can they be a player for us down the line? And obviously Kyle Dubas and the rest of the scouting staff, they felt that every single one of these picks had opportunities to develop into something that we can use down the line. And if they're confident in these picks, and I'm confident in them, then why not? Let's go for it.
Wayne Gretzky was 6 feet tall and 180 pounds.
Thank you.
Size is so not everything. That sounds dirty. It's more girth is more important than height. That sounds dirty.
We're taking a wrong turn here, boys. You know what? Going into this offseason, now the draft is behind us, and we can look forward to what is coming for July 1st. We all know that Marner needs to get done, and then we need to shore up our D. Omar, if you had to place money, do we A, retain Gardner? Do we B, chase free agents to fill in the back end? Or do we make a trade with, say, a Vegas who is in a cap crunch, looking at a Colin Miller or a Gusev or something of that nature? If you had to put money down, and Doug, this question goes out to you too, my friend, right after Omar's done, how do you think we shore up our back end?
Well, I think, considering what we've seen in the past and what we're about to see, I think the Leafs shouldn't touch free agency with a 10-foot pole. Now, the reason why I say that is because I read something this morning that said that Tyler Myers wants at least $8 million a year. So that right there, that just says everything that's wrong about free agency. And it's a line that goes through hockey every single year, that you're not supposed to build your team through free agency. Sometimes you have a core of a team, you want to add a piece here, add a piece there. Maybe you sign a Tyler Ennis. Maybe you sign some other person who you feel can help stabilize the core you already have, but you shouldn't be adding key pieces in free agency. Obviously, there are special moments where you can do that. Hence, John Tavares. But that's something that has never been done. Like, you never see a first overall pick of Tavares' caliber hitting free agency. You just don't see that anymore. Will that change down the line? Probably, because people will look at what Tavares said and say, hey, I can do that too. And then, it'll just go on. But I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't be going to free agency to add a core piece, because then that's when you run into problems. That's where you have Edmonton, who is desperately trying to get rid of Lucic because they decided to give him a $6 million cap hit. Vancouver signed Louis Eriksson to a ridiculous contract. The Montreal Canadiens are trying to get rid of Carl Alsner, and they signed him 2 years ago. He played the majority of the season in the AHL last year, right? So I feel like you put yourself in danger when you do things like that, especially now that we know that the NHL and the NHLPA are trying to limit how much the cap goes up. So a lot of teams right now are freaking out because I think earlier people thought the cap was going to go up to $83 million. I don't know. I think I read that somewhere. And now it's at 81. It only went up by 2. Or sorry, no, it's 81.5. Sorry, and it only went up by 2. Right. So then you have teams like Nashville who knowingly fleece themselves so they can make room and move Subban, so they can have an opportunity to, one, re-sign Roman Josi, and two, have an opportunity to sign Duchesne in the summer. right? So you put yourself in difficult positions. So I feel like what the Leafs need to do is look at other teams who have a wealth of a certain position or need to make a move. So you brought up Vegas. I think that's exactly where the Leafs need to go at. Look at a player like Colin Miller, who's been linked to the Leafs for a long time. I think even dating back to like before he joined Vegas, there's talks that Colin Miller can come aboard. But yeah, like, they're a team. They've been in existence for 2 years and they're in cap trouble.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty damn bad.
Let's think about that
here.
Right?
They're also a team that's been to the Stanley Cup Finals. So,
100%. 100%. But I wouldn't be surprised if George McPhee and everyone else are kind of looking around and be like, guys, what happened? Right? So yeah.
Yeah, 2 years ago they were a napkin with zero salary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so going back to the Leafs, I definitely think that if you want to improve your blue line, and if you want to get, because you don't just want to add a guy, you want to add an impact person, and teams aren't just going to give that up for nothing. So I think you do have to be creative, use those connections that you establish in the league, make some phone calls, and try to prize some guys. Now, what do those trades look like? I have no idea. That's the worst part of blogging about hockey. I'm horrible at predicting trades. That's why I never do be a GM mode in NHL 19. I can't do it. I literally can't do it. Someone offers me a trade, I'm like, that's a horrible trade, but it's actually a good one, and I just can't do it because, like, in my mind, I think I'm being fleeced. So yeah, I think that's what you need to do. You need to identify certain situations and then try to add through there. So like now, when it comes to Jake Gardner. Gardner's kind of along the same lines. I think it was Nick Kyprios who said that the baseline for Gardner would be $7 million a year. Like, man, like that's not gonna fly here. Like we can't do that. I think that's the least need to get into that mentality, is that we can't be overpaying. You overpay your stars, you overpay your superstars, but for everyone else, you make this or you got to go. That's it. And I feel like the Leafs have identified who their stars are, who they're willing to give money to, and then everyone else is kind of like, okay, well, we'll be okay without you. And they have people coming. Sure, it sucks that Dermott's going to miss the beginning of the season, but they have people coming. If Rasmus Sandin can continue to grow, I'm not saying he's going to make the team at a camp next year, but like maybe he can get the Dermott treatment from a while back where he got called up midway and just stayed there. Timothy Liljegren, can he take a next step in the future? Right? So they have people. So I feel like you make a deal like a Colin Miller. You add a Colin Miller to stabilize that defense core, and then you just continue to add. Maybe you promote some guys kind of here and there, but I don't think going to free agency to answer your problems is going to work. And I feel like you don't want another Patrick Marleau situation coming down where or say 5 years from now, Matthews is up. You need to pay him even more. And it's like, oh man, but we gave Tyler Myers $9 million. What are we going to do? Right? So I just feel like you handcuff yourself when you get into those problems. So I'd rather identify some teams, make some deals, than go to free agency and spend your brains out and then regret it later on.
So you wouldn't re-sign Gardner?
I mean, I'm okay with Gardner coming back at the right price. If it's $7 million, I'm sorry, Jake. I'm sorry. I rewatched that drop back pass that ended up in the back of our net in Game 7. I rewatched the one that you did the year before. So, I mean, you're sick, you're wicked, but even think about it too. If Gardner's on the team next year, where is he playing? Yeah. Is he not playing on the bottom pair? Yeah. I'm not giving $7 million to a third pair. I'm sorry. No. No. No, especially when you have other people coming up. No, I'm sorry, pal.
Here's what gets me.
Sure.
Is that I think that Gardner would do better on any other team and for any other organization than he did with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Only you're not going to be able to quantify that, and because it's totally going to be about the amount of pressure and history he has with this team and all that crap. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to the Leafs dealing Gardner away for someone who's probably half as good and will get half the number of points and be half as defensively as responsible, and for all of Leafs Nation to go, yeah! And then some other portion of Leafs Nation to go, oh, that was stupid. And yeah, it's just going to be a big mess no matter. To me, I'm surprised there hasn't been more of a focus on it in the media. I know we've got the whole Marner situation that everybody's worried about. To me, that this is Gardner is more of a problem because we need better defensemen. There aren't a ton of defensemen in the NHL that are better than Jake Gardiner is, as much as a significant portion of Leafs Nation would hate to admit it. He is one of the best defensemen in the league.
Definitely.
I think it's going to be a similar situation to what we said about the draft pick, that, we're going to deal him away and then he's going to end up being like a top 3 friggin' whatever the defensive MVP trophy is. I can't remember.
Norris.
But
trophy,
you can say you can say that about anyone too. Like look at Zaitsev. I guarantee Zaitsev's going to go to another team and get like 45 points. And
Yep.
like, see, we should have kept him.
For
It's like,
sure.
No.
But it's about usage though. The reason
Yep,
why
it
Zaitsev
is.
looked great in his first year is because
Power play.
in his first year, Babcock, exactly, the power play. Babcock was allowing him to be more offensive in his first year. And then in years 2 and 3, Babcock looked at him and said, you know what, I'm going to turn you into the Selke of defenseman. You do not cross that offensive red line unless I say anything. And he said that too in his interview to Russia. He said, like, before I used to be able to skate more with the puck, but then later on, the puck goes into the offensive zone and then I have to change. Right.
Yep,
so
exactly.
It's about that's another thing you have to think about when it comes to, why did this player put up so many points this year and then it went down? Well, you have to think of how they're being used.
Yep.
And that's why I love Connor Brown. Well, like, I know he has to go, but everyone kind of says, like, Connor Brown's trash. What happened in his first year? Because in his first year, he was allowed to be more offensive.
Yep.
He could skate down the wing, make plays down low. But when Babcock started to like him and said, "Hey, you're going to be in the next Hyman," what was he doing as soon as he got the puck into the offensive zone? Dump it off the boards, forecheck hard, get it to someone else. And that's what happened. The year before, when he was playing with Bozak and JVR, he was the babysitter. He had to make sure that, hey, if they turn over the puck, I'm the first one back, so nothing else happens. Right, so those are the things that you have to take in consideration. Am I saying that Connor Brown is a year in year out 20 goal scorer? No, but I think there is offense to his game that he's just not able to access because of what he's asked to do on the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's why everyone's saying that he should go to Edmonton, because if he plays with Connor McDavid, he's going to put up points. And I agree 100%. But that's just because in Edmonton, or any other team rather, he's going to be asked to be doing different things. But not what he would be doing on the Leafs. Same thing for Zaitsev, same thing for Gardiner. Babcock tries to rely on Gardiner for more defense. That's why we always saw him with Zaitsev before Muzzin came back. But then Gardiner and Zaitsev, were just, after a while, it didn't look as good as it did. Granted, did it look great all the time? No, but you can't help what you have, right? I think that's a great point. It's going to happen. That you always see that all the time. The team, a pro player is okay on one team, they go to a different team, and they're like, oh my god, where did this come from? Well, like, it's since the scenarios they're put in, how they're used, who they play with, they all play a factor, and that's why coaching is such a difficult job, especially in the NHL, because you have to identify your players' strengths, who they play well with, in what situations. You have to put them in those positions to succeed. Was that a jab at Babcock? Of course not. I wouldn't criticize Babcock. No way.
I think
here's one other thing very quick there about Connor Brown. I think the Leafs will hang on to him beyond the beginning of the season, only because Zach Hyman is hurt, and Connor Brown does have that kind of work ethic and can play in your top 6, as we just talked about the goal scoring. Not only that, that'll give him a little bit more visibility, maybe boost his profile, maybe get a little bit of a better return once Hyman does come back. You get to shed that cap space, but then you also get to, pump and dump that player, give him back to where he needs to be. Like you said, in Edmonton, even though they don't have the cap space, I'm sure there's somewhere he can go. But I just wanted to touch on Connor Brown right quick because, getting a top 6 role with Hyman out might be able to elevate that profile to get you more back in return.
Definitely.
I think a lot of what ties into what Omar was saying and a bit what you were just saying is that the longer you're in the NHL, the longer you're in professional sports, the more scouted you are. And that can knock you down quite a few pegs. I feel like that's mostly responsible for, especially when you're on the same team and they're expecting the same thing from you year after year. Like, everybody in the league knows how to get around Jake Gardiner and how to exploit his weaknesses. You send Jake to a new team, he's going to have a new scout, a new set of scouting staff on his own team looking at him. They're going to be able to pick up and change things that other teams wouldn't be able to do. Yeah, and I feel like you could say the same thing about Zaitsev, you could say the same thing about Brown, and that's what it is. everything that we've done has to be looked at in a vacuum because of the fact that the expansion draft is looming like a dark cloud over everything. Omar, do you think that that's going to limit the team's certain moves, knowing their roster might be pillaged come that time?
Well, I think when I think about the Seattle expansion, I laugh because I always see people on Twitter saying like, "Oh, Seattle's going to come into the league and make the Stanley Cup final again." No, because what's going to happen is that people are Seattle or all the other teams are going to see what happened with Vegas and not do the same thing. So the GM of Seattle isn't going to talk to Florida and say, "Hey, Florida, can you give me like 2 of your best players so they can be on our first line?" They're not going to go to Columbus and say, "Hey, Columbus, you want to give me a player that you don't use, and we're going to turn him into a 40 goal scorer the next year?" So like a lot of teams are making those like, "Hey, we'll give you this to not take this player" deal, and then the player that they got in bonus ended up being a key player on their team, like Alex Tuck, Riley Smith, William Karlsson. They were all the extras. The hey, we'll give you this. Don't take our player. And I think now what's going to happen is that teams are going to be like, okay, whatever, take whatever you want, right? Now when it comes to the actual expansion draft, I think that's going to be a little interesting too because you have a couple of years in between. Teams who are exempt from a lot of the expansion drafts beforehand are going to be in a different position now. Like when you look at the Leafs, when there was that first expansion, it was okay because like our best players were on entry level deals and were eligible, so it's fine. But when that comes up, you're going to have to protect certain players and let other players go. But I think what's going to happen is that a team might kind of start to circle who they're definitely going to protect and then kind of make a list of all the players who could be available. And if there are like 2 players who they think like are certainly at risk of being taken away for free, then you might see those type of deals like the kind of like, we might lose you anyway, let's move you somewhere else and then kind of get something for that. I think it's going to be a kind of more deals along that line of opposed to a lot of like, hey, take this so you don't take our player type of thing. I think now that teams have been involved in an expansion draft, like this new form of expansion draft, I think there's going to be a lot more preparation for it, but in the sense that they're going to have a better idea of who to take, who to leave unprotected, who to protect, and what to kind of do in those circumstances. So I think Seattle isn't going to have as easy as a time in their first year as Vegas did. Granted, who they hire as a coaching staff makes all the difference. Gerard Gallant did amazing things for Vegas. He walked in day one and said, "Hey, everyone's expecting us to suck. Let's prove them wrong," and they did. But we can't not say that the rest of the league didn't help them out a bit. Like basically, like everyone in the league Vegas turned into Chicago that year. You know how like every year Chicago is in cap trouble, and then like a whole bunch of teams
up
like
to help them out.
Oh, a bunch of teams make a whole bunch of teams bail them out. Yeah, that was Vegas. That was Vegas year one. Right, and I don't think teams are going to be doing that. I think they're going to be accepting of the fact they're going to lose a player, so they're just going to make other moves to ensure that, hey, if we might lose this guy, let's move him out somewhere else, get a draft pick for him, whatever, just so we can get something for him. Or they'll just say, you know what, just take him, it's fine. Like, well, maybe a cock an eyebrow a little bit or something like that. But yeah, I know expansion always is a dark cloud because there's the mystery to it. You don't know who you're going to lose, who's going to stay afterwards. But I think I think a lot of teams are going to be a little more prepared for it, and I guess come out on the lighter side there.
I honestly can't wait for the expansion draft to happen. I was really excited last time. Like you said, Omar, I think teams are a little bit more wise this time. They're not going to be throwing around assets to protect players. I think it's going to be a guy that's just going to have to accept the fact that you're going out the door. You look at a player like Alexander Edler, who just signed in Vancouver. He signed the 2-year deal, but the caveat of him wanting to sign that deal and to make sure the sticking point was he wanted a no trade, no movement on his deal, so that way he would not be included on the list when that came up. So that's the point that I'm trying to start to think across. A lot more players are going to want stability if signing a deal with a team, especially a long-term deal. They're going to want that no move, so that way they could not be included on those lists. But then that hampers the team because there's only a certain amount of players you can be able to keep. And if you got 7 guys that are meh on a no move deal, then all of a sudden you're letting somebody very prominent off your roster walk. So that's why I, in my mind, wanted this brought up this episode, because that was something that really caught me off guard with the Alexander Edler negotiations. him making sure that was in there so he couldn't be moved. So I think we're going to see more of it coming up with a lot more players, just to ensure that they are going to be staying with the team that they're signing for, especially on long-term deals. But it is that dark cloud, and it is going to be coming very soon. So teams better get ready and start fearing the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Doug?
I mean, I haven't thought about the expansion draft like at all. I know I asked the question, but it seems so far away. Do either of you know if it happens before or after the actual draft next year?
It happens before.
It's before, because I think, isn't it on the the awards, the NHL awards night?
Yes. That, I think
Yeah.
I've
So
heard that.
it's before. Yeah.
All right. Well, then I care a little bit more. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. It's one of those things. Like, there's only so many players you can protect. There's not much to be done about that situation. Like, you just have to accept you're going to lose probably at least one player that you really would have preferred to not lose because they're not going to pick the crappy guys. I don't know. I'll worry about it. That's a bridge that we can wait to cross, in my opinion. Omar, buddy, it's been awesome talking with you. We got to go. We're out of time. Where can people find your work online? Give us your social medias and whatever else.
Pretty much easiest place to find me is at Twitter at OLW93. I say things like when I get really angry about the Marner situation, I make a whole bunch of tweets about it, just because it's so exhausting. It's just so, like, all the medias and the Darren Dreggers and the Friedman saying all this stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, we get it. And the whole, like, the Leafs want to give him 11.5, but he wants an 8-year deal, but he doesn't want an 8-year deal, so he's going to talk to the other teams. Like, okay, that's fine. Okay. Can I say something?
Go for it.
Can I say something? All right. Okay. So everyone likes to throw around the whole offer sheet thing. That's cool. That's fine. Okay, so let's look at the teams who actually can offer sheet Marner. Carolina. Are they going to do that? Sure, fine. Offer sheet Marner. That's cool. Because he's established clearly that he wants Austin Matthews money, so that's at least $11 million. Thank you for the four first-round picks. Also, thank your fans, because now that you give Marner 11, what are you going to have to give Sebastian Aho that you have to be signed? Think about that? No. Islanders, sure, offer sheet him as well. But then when Barzell needs a new contract, be prepared to give him $13 million. Cool, awesome. Let's move on. Like there's the threat of an offer sheet doesn't make any sense, because as soon as you give a certain player that type of money, it boosts everything up, every single thing up, especially if they're better. Marner does not score goals. He does not score goals, right? So so I don't understand where the Matthews comparable comes up. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yep,
like,
two different positions too.
Exactly. Like, for me, 9.5, 9.75, that's complete. That makes so much sense.
Very fair.
So much sense, right? And especially when you look at Jeff Skinner, who's making $9 million, he scored 40 goals. Cool. That makes sense. People like to compare Marner to Patrick Kane all the time. Yeah, because Patrick Kane scores goals.
And he's
$10.5 million. Yeah, and he gave Chicago 2 Stanley Cups. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. Nikita Kucherov had 128 points.
Yeah.
Like, you can't tell me I make my own comparables. No, you don't, dude. Like, that's why for this specific example, I wish they just open arbitration. I wish he said that to a judge. I make my own comparables. He's like, okay, that's funny. That's funny. Here's your 2-year bridge. Go do it again. I keep saying this all the time. If Marner scored 40 goals and had 54 assists, I wouldn't say anything. I'd be like, okay, yeah, $11 million, that makes sense. But no, dude. And yeah, sure, you had a lot of assists, but you also had someone putting the puck in the net.
Yeah.
It's not like you force pushed him, Tavares, to shoot the puck too. Like, someone has to score the goals, right? Like,
playmaking is so fickle. Playmaking is. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you put Freddie the Goat with Marner, does Freddie the Goat have 30 goals? Come on. So, like, I think this whole thing is just ridiculous. And, like, we know it's going to get settled. He's going to sign for some number for 5 years or whatever it is. But he's not going anywhere, and that's why this whole thing is so exhausting. And if he's so set on the fact that he wants $11 million, fine, trade him for a defenseman. Then we're okay.
Yep, and the other thing
Because
is every team that makes an offer sheet is a team that's basically guaranteeing that the Leafs aren't going to make a deal with them in the future. That's how you sour
100%.
relationships. Yeah, and no one wants. And
And
not
that's
only
why
that,
it doesn't happen.
yeah, exactly. And not only that, but you're souring your relationship with other NHL teams too. That you're going to say, well, you're going to offer sheet my guy next. Like you're cutting yourself off from trades and stuff. It just doesn't make sense in every way. I totally agree.
Yeah, it absolutely
Unless
doesn't.
your name's
Like,
Ray
I don't
Shero
get-
because he doesn't care.
Yeah, like I don't get, like, apparently Patrick Laine wants $10 million. That makes sense. So Marner, you're saying you want to make more than Patrick Laine, who people are saying is the next Alexander Ovechkin? Like, come on, man. Like, come on.
Now, to
Like,
be fair,
I get it.
Omar, I did say earlier in the year on our podcast that I thought Marner was the next Gretzky. So you could honestly, maybe his agent listens to our show, and that's where oh God.
Maybe. I don't know. I just think people need to
Way
take a
to go,
collective
Doug.
breath. Like Ferris does this every year. He did the same thing with Goudreau. They said, like, oh, we're not going to play, and then he played. Anderson in Columbus, he requested a trade, and then he signed. So, like, I just think there's no other way around this than the fact that they're going to sign. Sorry, I needed to get that out. I don't know. Anytime someone says Marner's name, I just, like, I have like a little switch that goes in my mind, and then I want to rant about it.
I think
So
we all do.
yeah.
All right, well, Omar, we always enjoy you stopping by Offside. I'm glad this finally happened. We will have you
Yeah.
on again before the season start, buddy.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for coming on, Omar. Greatly appreciated. Always fun talking with you.
Yeah, you too, guys. Take it easy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back now sitting down with Mark Seidel after the draft. This is the special with Offside Hockey Talk, breaking down what the Leafs did over the weekend and also speaking on everything else draft-centric. Mark, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
Good. How are you guys doing?
I'm not doing too bad myself. Doug, how about you?
I just had a fun weekend at the TEP showcase, working at the Scotiabank Pond. Got to see a whole bunch of the best Tier 2, Junior A, probably some Junior B and Junior C guys kicking around as well, playing in a do-or-die tournament. So that was lots of fun. There was 2 different Markham Royals teams, a couple different... The Brooks Bandits were there, or at least a portion of them. 2 different Markham Royals teams. Stouffville Spirit were there. There was a team kind of from the Aurora Tigers. So I got to see a whole bunch of young kids playing hockey, and I'm glad to not be spending another 14 hours in a hockey arena.
Well, this show here is going to be centric around the Maple Leafs, everything they did at the draft weekend, and then, of course, a few takeaways from the other things that did happen around the draft. Mark, I have to ask you right out the gate, how do you feel the Leafs fared this weekend?
Well, I think you have to look at it in this vein, guys. I think if you believe in what Kyle Dubas and how they're trying to build their team, I think they did well. I think, they're trying to build a skilled team, could care less about size, want to be able to skate. And if that's the attributes that Kyle sent his scouts in with, I think they did pretty well. They got guys that fit that mold for the most part. Whether or not that model can win 4 rounds in the playoffs is certainly still up for debate, and you can debate whether or not that was, that's the proper way to build it. But obviously that's how Kyle wants to build his team and believes strongly in it. And so I think from that standpoint, the scouts left after the weekend with a pretty good haul of guys that fit the exact criteria they're looking for.
Doug, how do you feel the Leafs fared, buddy?
I mean, if you look at purely stats and how the various guys performed in their various leagues, and also how many guys we managed to pick up that were should have gone higher in the draft, but we somehow ended up with them, then it looks really good. If you're looking at it purely from that perspective, then I think they did really well. Me and you, James, have had a bit of a back and forth on Twitter about whether or not the Leafs should have signed more Toronto, Ontario-born players, but that's kind of a secondary discussion as to making sure you use your draft picks wisely. I feel like they do go in hand. You kind of don't agree with me there. You kind of feel like it's strictly I don't know. Why don't you elaborate on your thoughts on that real quick?
Well, I mean, my thoughts are, you spend the year with your scouts, looking at these players, picking up on things, trying to make sure that you use your assets the best way you can when you do pick these players. And a prime example of everyone, including Don Cherry, jumping on this wagon that we didn't draft anyone from the GTHL or we didn't pick up anybody Ontario-based. If you look at Robertson himself, actually, he moved here as a younger kid and did grow up in the GTHL program, did play for the OHL Pete's. So he is a product of that system still. So, I mean, even though he's an American-born player, which is the first thing everybody seems to look at, he did play in the GTHL, which is not exactly a good old Ontario boy, but this is where he played the bulk of his hockey. To go back to the other comment there, I do believe that when you have your assets, whether they be picks or whether it be players that you're trying to develop, you should be using those the best way you can. And that's what you have your scouts for and the guys that you trust to get these players in place for building blocks for the future. I feel this draft was a lot of more long-term thinking opposed to players that can get in right away. Mark, I'd let you chime in on that. What do you think about the situation where people think that we didn't draft any really Ontario players, and of course people looking at the players that we did get wondering where they fit in down the line?
Well, I think, I've been in those meetings and I've been in the draft with the National Hockey League team. So you spend the whole year scouting and you put your list together and you spend hour after hour, hundreds of them together trying to put your list in the exact order. And, I get Don's point, but at the end of the day, when you're sitting there on draft day, you can't be jumping around the board trying to find a Canadian. I mean, if the Canadian fit in, and I guarantee they had Canadians high on their list, but unfortunately they were gone when they picked. So, that kind of stuff certainly happened. I think they were high on Blake Murray, and Carolina took him right before them in the sixth. So there's guys in their list that are Canadian. Unfortunately, when it gets to their pick, you're not going to jump down 10 spots and say, well, geez, we don't want to take an American here. We want to take a Canadian from Toronto. Don's point about kids will play hard in Toronto, sure, I get that, I guess. And if it would have worked out that way, fine. But you can't build your list strictly around trying to where a kid is from, where he played. You make a great point about Nick Robertson. He's an OHL guy. He played in GTHL. Sure, his birth certificate says he's American, but there's not a lot beyond that says he's an American. So I just don't get it a little bit. Now, as I said when I started, we can debate whether or not going small skill is the way to build a team. And it was or less constructed in a way that fits a traditional mold. No, but it was built on small speed, not necessarily small, but speed and skill. And it just so happened when the picks came up, they took those guys. But you can't base just on nationality. I mean, it's there's some intangibles that can play into it, but you can't build your list or jump around on draft day trying to find a guy that's a Canadian.
Well, another thing there, just before Doug jumps in about Robertson, he's 17 years old. He has the late birthday, so he's another player that can still grow. So at 5'9" or 5'10", he could still grow a bit more and still build to that frame, being a younger player in this draft. So I do see that there is some more upside to him. I think he's the more polished of the guys that we drafted, but who knows, really. Obviously, when you draft players, it's all magic beans until they hit the ice and you start seeing what they can have. Doug, what are your thoughts here after hearing all that?
I mean, my whole thing is that I find it really hard to believe that, especially in the third and pardon me, it'd be the fourth and fifth round picks, that their only options were those guys, and there weren't good Canadian or Ontario-born options. I could be wrong. I didn't have enough research that I can say that that's definitive what I'm saying. That's just my gut instinct. For me, you have to go back to what Mark said and what you said, which is that you're looking for the best available players. You can't go wrong doing that, at least in terms of developing your hockey team. You can't make a mistake if you're drafting what is your scout's opinion, and your opinion is the best available player. But I'm still disappointed. I mean, I think I'm allowed to be disappointed. I mean, I grew up playing hockey in the GTHL, and if you told me that when I grew up that I wouldn't be able to make the Leafs because they literally aren't going to draft anyone from Toronto or Ontario, I would be very upset and disappointed as a kid playing hockey. That being said, there's a reason we don't let kids run our hockey teams or run our hockey league. So I feel like you can go back and forth with this one. I think we have to. At this point, it's done. It's over and done with. Going back to Mark, if you had to pick one of the guys that the Leafs drafted, and I think we're going to actually discount Nicholas Robertson. We're going to go down the other few guys. Which would you say probably has the most likely chance? Is it strictly the order that we drafted in them, or do you see one of them having a set of traits that better fits in with where the Leafs are going?
I think if I had to pick one, I might go with the Abramov kid. Obviously, Kokkonen was drafted ahead of Abramov. I'm just a little concerned, and I just talked about how they want guys that can skate and have skill. Kokkonen isn't the greatest skater in the world. He's certainly a smart, heady player, high hockey IQ, but I'm a little concerned about his feet. So, if I had to pick somebody of the rest of that group that I thought had a chance to play, I think Abramov is that guy. He's got some jam to his game. He's not afraid. He puts up points. He goes in dirty areas. He's not going to be a top 6 guy probably, but I can see him fitting in somewhere on a roster down the road. So, of the rest of the guys, Abramov would probably be the guy that I would take that, I think has the best chance of playing in the National League.
I'm gonna agree. Just based on the fact that you're talking about a Russian-born kid who spent time in arguably the toughest major junior loop, which is the QMJHL. That speaks a lot to the type of player that he's going to be. I think. I think that's kind of where I was trying to lead you a bit. Was that to me that says the most. Is that about a player is the style of hockey they were able to excel in playing in. So it's not just that they did good in their respective major junior, OHL, QMJHL, whatever. It's that they excelled within that type of hockey. So that's what I feel. I'm probably the most excited to see. Probably the most excited to see Kokkonen play. Robertson there's expectations are a little high, and I believe he's also the youngest draft picked out of all the ones we selected, so there's a bit more waiting there. So I'm excited to see Kokkonen, although I like the idea of Abramov as well. These are defense and a center that I feel like we both desperately need. James, what are your takes, buddy?
Well, I spoke with Taco, another gentleman who likes to look at the prospects a little bit earlier, and Mark, to echo what you said about the skating on Kokkonen and Robertson to some degree, both slower in foot speed, but we do have one of the greatest. I wouldn't say just the greatest. Barb Underhill, she's brought players along and got their skating up the level so that people thought couldn't be. Fixed their mechanics a little bit. You look at a player like Frederick Gauthier, who would have thought last year you would have heard a burst of speed from Gauthier as he goes flying in the zone. Not something I thought I'd ever say, but it definitely did happen more than once. So for me, you look at those two players, Doug, I'm excited for Kokkonen just for the name. But Mark, what do you think about that? Do you think Barb can get these guys' mechanics down a little bit better and maybe see a little bit more skating and sound foot speed out of these guys?
Well, I think certainly Barb is one of the best in the business. You're 100% right there. And, the Leafs, the one thing that Kyle has done a really good job of is building the sports science department. They've got obviously an unlimited budget for what they want to do outside of the cap with their players. And one of the areas he's really worked on is that sports science part. And for the most part, if they can, they bring these kids in and skate with Barb on the ice. And Barb spends time with them, evaluates their stride, evaluates a bunch of things, and goes back to the management and the scouts and says, this kid can improve a lot. This kid can't skate. He'll never be able to skate. The biomechanics don't work. So, a lot of these guys, I don't know which of these guys he actually skated, because the guys were at the combine. They didn't skate when the Leafs brought them in. But Barb certainly watches videotape of them from the season. So, they really go deep into it. And I believe, especially a guy like Kokkonen, who I think his skating has to get a lot better. I think Barb probably went to them and said, listen, I can work with this kid. I can help him and get his skating certainly up to par to play in the NHL. So, I think to answer your question, I think Barb is an unbelievable asset they have. They utilize her to the best of her ability. And I think, she's going to be able to work with all these guys. And obviously it felt like she could work with them and make them better. So that's why they took them.
No, for sure. Well, when it comes to the draft this weekend, what is your biggest takeaway? It doesn't have to be Leaf related. Just the biggest takeaway from the draft that happened in first round, second round, wherever. What is the biggest takeaway for you?
Well, I think, to be honest, you heard so much in draft week about all these potential trades, and I'm not necessarily talking about, trade of draft picks to move up and down. That happened, obviously, but, all the big names were afloat, and everybody I talked to all week, that's all anybody wanted to talk about. I mean, it's the first draft in a long time where the draft at times seems secondary with all these big names being talked about, certainly the free agency stuff with Marner and the other RFAs. I just felt like, even during the draft at times, there was a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about these things that were going to happen, and ultimately didn't come to fruition. We didn't see a lot of free agents get signed out of there. Obviously, it's a long weekend with the draft, but I thought it was almost overshadowed with the talk of the cap being lower than what everybody thought, and the potential trades. And obviously the Subban, the Marlowe deal both went down, but with the amount of talk the teams had, I thought there would be a lot more trade activity, and I think in a bit of a way it took away from the draft bit. But at the end of the day, every team walked away with they all think they had A+ weekends, and we'll see how it goes down the road. But I just thought the trade talk was incredible for the week.
It's funny you mentioned the trade talk, because our next question was going to be about the Patrick Marleau trade and what your thoughts were given up. Do you think that giving up a potential first round top 10 pick and I believe it was a 5th or a 6th rounder, do you think that makes sense for what the Leafs got back?
100%. I thought it was a great deal by Kyle. I really did. I mean, you have to assume the Leafs next year are going to be picking between, say, 23 and 31. Obviously, Leaf fans hope it's 31, but it's going to be a late first-round pick. By getting rid of Marleau, you're allowed to sign, obviously, Johansson and Kapanen. You get both those deals done. And I know the fear in Leafland and the management was, you forget the offer sheet of Marner. That's its own issue. But what if somebody offers Kapanen $5 million, or Johansson $5 million, and all you get is a second-round pick out of it? Now, if you match, your salary cap's out of whack, and you can't let them go for a second-round pick. So I think getting those two locked up was a direct result of the Marleau deal. And nobody wants to give up a first-round pick, but that's just the way it works in today's day and age. You could have given up a player off the Marlies that you think is going to be you project as a good player in the National Hockey League. Instead, they gave up a first, which again, he's not going to play in the Leafs for 3-4 years probably at minimum, and it's a crapshoot when you're picking 25 to 30. So I thought it was a great move. I think there was a bit of a shock factor. Everybody thought, geez, they're giving up a first year, but that contract was so onerous and was so hard in their cap that it freed him up a little bit. Now he's still got a lot of work to do, but I thought at the end of the day, I thought it was a really good trade.
The one thing that I like about the trade the most is it seems like every GM, and I've said this already tonight, that they've learned from Pierre Dorian with the lottery protection on the pick. So it is top 10 protected. So if we do, for whatever reason, have a horrible year, our defense doesn't come to play, Matthews is plagued with injury, whatever happens, the sky falls out, and we end up picking in the top 10, we do have that protection on that pick. So it gives you that extra insurance no matter what, which it seems to be a lot of GMs are now doing after how Pierre Dorian, with that Ottawa deal, just completely got fleeced.
Yeah, I think it was an important, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, we've seen it in the NBA for many years with lottery protected picks, and we haven't seen it as much in the NHL, but I think you're 100% right. Guys saw Pierre, saw the situation he was in, and decided they want to protect themselves a little bit. And even if they pick 11th, let's just say the Leafs have a terrible year and they pick 11th, you're still probably not getting a superstar at 11. And in return, you're able to take Johansson and Kapanen and have them sign for a couple of years here. So again, I just thought it was a really good deal. You get over the shock value, but I thought it worked out well for them.
You could do a lot worse. You could definitely do a lot worse than what they did. Me and James were saying just before we called you, we started talking about are the Leafs going to be able to find the points that they're losing by giving up Marleau? Like it might not seem like a lot. I think he had 30 or 40 total points, maybe 16 goals and some number of assists. I mean, and then they just signed Johansson and Kapanen for a little bit over more than what they signed for, $7 million, as James also informed me before the podcast started. Do you think that the Leafs will struggle to find those points that they've lost, or is it kind of just inconsequential at this point?
Now, I think the Leafs will have no problem putting up points. I mean, all those guys, all the key guys are going to be a year older. They're going to be a year better. You think of, Kapanen certainly blew everybody's doors off this year with the year he had. Johansson came in and proved he could put up some points. I mean, I think Patrick was way more influential in the room in terms of teaching those guys how to be pros than he was on the ice. I mean, his ice time will get eaten up, and I don't think they're going to have any problem scoring goals. I think they'll be one of the highest scoring teams again. Just with the core they have, obviously, if they bring Marner back. So, no, I don't think that's an issue. I think, losing those points. The leadership is an issue, though. I mean, this is a guy who's revered around the league and taught those kids. You saw the relationship he had with Marner and Matthews and other guys in that room. And I think his ability to teach guys how to be pros is very, very important. I think it was good for him to be in Toronto for 2 years. But, you can get rid of the 6.5 and move on, and I think you have to do it.
Well, I think you can make up those 30 points pretty easily. Right off the tip of the tongue, for me, it becomes William Nylander with a full camp and being able to maybe ride shotgun with Matthews. I think that if he clicks again for another 60 or maybe 70 points, you're already making it up there. plus lost in all the shuffle with all the new players coming in from the draft and also the trade and free agent talk and everything going around the Leafs. We did sign that Russian Mikheyev as well, who is guaranteed a roster spot by all accounts so far by Dubas and Babcock, and he's expected to contribute right off the hop. Whether he's going to be on the third line or wherever he fits in, that is another player that you don't know is an X factor that could possibly put up 20, 30 points in his own right. Who knows? But with the skill set he has, they're looking for him to contribute offensively. So hopefully we don't lose out. But like I said, with Nylander off the tip of the tongue, and then of course the young Mikheyev coming in, and other guys getting elevated minutes. You look at Connor Brown might get a better chance now that Marlowe's gone. There's lots of guys, especially with Hyman being out. Another guy might get elevated minutes as well. So there's definitely going to be points to be had to go around. I don't think we'll be any shortage of them.
Yeah, I think even at the end of the year, I think fans, you guys and other Leaf fans should be, I think, ready for the fact that you're gonna. I said at the end of the year, I could see them having 7 new faces on opening night in October, and a lot of people thought I was crazy. But you start taking guys away, some of the free agents that are going to leave, and they're going to fill them in, with guys from the Marlies and stuff. So, I think you're going to see new mix. You talk about the Russian that came in, and nobody talks about who's got some big upside. So there's a lot of guys to fill those spots. But when you've got a power play the way they can, and you can load up 3 lines the way they can, I don't think points are going to be an issue at all.
That makes me feel better.
Well, this weekend at the draft, was there anything that kind of blew you away pick-wise or a player sliding? For me, it was Raphael Lavoie. Seeing him go 38th to Edmonton was a little bit of a slide for me. I thought he'd definitely go first round. But getting a player with his finishing ability and a little bit of size and snarl to his game may be just the player that Connor McDavid needs. But to go to the bulk of the question, is there anything that you saw, like I said, slide-wise or anything that was like, well, okay, I didn't see that coming, but we'll roll with it?
Well, I got sort of got 2 answers for you. The first is, and I hate to say that, we get it. I like to say to people, we're like a broken clock. We're right twice a day. Moritz Seider is a player that I've loved all year. Our European guys loved all year. We had him at 5 overall, and I know when Detroit took him at 6, there was obviously a lot of shock and awe around the building and certainly on TV and the commentators. I thought that was the case that people have to, especially for the casual fan, they have to understand teams don't care where all the independent scouting agencies have guys. They don't care where NHL Central has guys. They build their list based on what they see and what they think. That's how we build our list. And I thought that was a case. It showed a lot that Detroit was willing to step up. People said, well, they should have traded down 5 or 10 or 12 spots and got him. You know what? When you get a guy you like, they did that, and I thought it was a good illustration that all these other and we're in the business as well with the independent scouting. But at the end of the day, teams, they've got their staff, they build what they see. I think basically you talked about the Lavoie kid. Didn't surprise me a lot. He's a kid that big, strong kid, certainly going to bring size to the Oilers. Had some bad nights this year. When he was good, he was really, really good. Some nights when he didn't play so well, he's really disappeared a little bit. So I think, again, it was good value there. I think he's got a chance. He's going to play in a league now, whether he plays in the top 6 or bottom 6, still to be determined. But I think the one shock I would say was probably Arthur Kaliev. I think it's, everybody kind of talked about it. This is a kid that scored 51 in Hamilton. Puts up goals. I've made, I think on your show, I brought up the point of, you put him on that American development program team, riding shotgun for Jack Hughes. How many does he score when everybody wants to talk about Cole Caulfield? Certainly there's some work ethic issues. There's a little bit of, this whole talk of his character and that I think gets overblown a little tiny bit. But for him to slip into the second round or for the Kings to get him, I think, everybody certainly in the starting kind of community was kind of shocked at that. And, obviously teams saw some stuff they didn't like, but to think he was going to sit there until Saturday morning, that was a surprise for everybody.
Well, Mark, I just wanted to thank you for everything that we've done, talked with you about leading up to the draft and this episode as well. It's always a pleasure having you on and helping us fill in the gaps in our own knowledge, which are sometimes gaping chasms. Just wanted to make sure that you know that you're always appreciated here on Offside Hockey Talk, and it's always a pleasure having you on.
No, listen, guys, I really enjoy your work. I enjoy what you do. I enjoy coming on. Certainly anytime I get a chance to talk hockey in a draft, it's a good time. We're now into the summer. We'll get through free agency here, but I appreciate you having me on. I certainly enjoyed it, and anything you need down the road, I'm here to help whenever I can.
Well, we definitely look forward to it, Mark, and have a great summer, sir. We'll be talking to you close to the beginning of the season, getting a look at some of these young guys that might crack the lineup.
Thanks, guys. You too.